is a force of nature in the cause of freedom and free markets. And I put Ayn Rand in the pantheon, and not just because of the enduring impact of her novels. In her objectivist writings, Rand reminds us that there is a real world out there, and that the only way to understand it is through reason. But is selfishness a virtue? Yaron says yes, and so did Rand. She applied reason to this question in her book of 1964, The Virtue of Selfishness. So let's go back to the seminal text. We'll find that on the rational terms Rand herself set, selfishness is clearly not a virtue. Rand begins by confronting the question of why she chose the word selfishness to, quote, denote virtuous qualities of character. In characteristic fashion, she answers, quote, for the reason that makes people afraid of it. She continues, the meaning ascribed in popular usage to the word selfishness is not merely wrong, it is responsible for the arrested moral development of mankind. Yet, she continues, the exact meaning and dictionary definition of the word selfishness is concern with one's own interests. This concept does not include a moral evaluation. Now, Yaron has at times referred to selfishness as Rand defined it, but in her own statement, Rand made it clear that it would be unreasonable for her to define an English word according to her own preferences. That's why she cites the, quote, exact meaning and dictionary definition of the word, which does not include a moral evaluation. Now, Yaron just commendably did cite the exact meaning and definition of the word, because it always includes a moral evaluation. It always means, ever since Samuel Johnson's dictionary was written in 1773 and on through all of Webster's dictionaries, it always means moral disapproval. The dictionary writers were doing their job by reflecting the fact that all written records of the word have used it in this way. The only difference between what Yaron just said and what Ayn Rand wrote is that she was quoting what she called the exact dictionary definition of the word, and she defined it as concern with one's own interest, full stop. Not concern with one's own interest to the detriment of others, not to the expense of others, full stop, just concern with one's own interest. So Rand was being rational. She was pinning a definition on the dictionary, but she was misquoting the dictionary. Now, why the sleight of hand? Why did Rand pretend she was citing the dictionary when she was clearly not doing so? Think of the heroic struggle.
There's different definitions of words throughout time. In the dictionary, sometimes the definition changes over time, over the usage of the word, and that's it.
She went through as an immigrant from the Soviet Union. Imagine that, like Rand, you and I grew up with the suffocating idea that anyone who refuses to serve the state is selfish. Also imagine that even in the U.S., we witnessed President John F. Kennedy in his 1961 inaugural address declare to much acclaim that we citizens must all ask what we can do for our country. If we had these experiences, we too might want to shout from the rooftops that selfishness is a virtue, just to jolt people out of their servility to the state. We too might want to rail against what Rand called the arrested moral development of mankind by calling selfishness a virtue, given the popularity of Kennedy's statement. But since we don't bear Rand's scars, we don't have to go down that false and destructive route, and neither does Yaron. To echo the words Rand herself used in her book, her use of the word selfishness is not merely wrong, it's done serious damage to public perception of the set of beliefs that Yaron and I both share. The use of the term needlessly antagonizes people by making it seem as though we who advocate freedom really do endorse a world in which people act in disregard of or at the expense of others. It does harm in another way. I've met followers of Rand who know what the word selfish really means and like to flaunt their indifference to others. These people do us no service. In a speech, Rand...
Then if they use it for the detriment of others and all that, what he just said, whatever what he just said, then he's not using, then they're not using the philosophy correctly. You know, the philosophy and the individual interpret the philosophy differently. As people are biased, everyone's biased. I'm biased. Everyone has their own biases. Even if they claim they're not biased, even if they claim they're not biased, like science is not biased. But it's biased by the scientific method, the method of science. It's biased to the laws of physics and all that stuff. Everyone's biased in their own way. So, the ethical philosophy of Ayn Rand, virtue of selfishness, like I said on the other video, people walking past me. So yeah, they're not using it correctly. They might call themselves objectivists, but sometimes they don't use it correctly. Like Christians are not Christians because they're not using the philosophy of Christ correctly. I met some good Christians and some fucked up Christians and some good people, bad people using the philosophy of their religion differently. Yeah. So yeah, just read the books and use it the correct way. Philosophers and people who follow religion. Religion is a form of philosophy. It's a primitive form of philosophy. Primitive form of philosophy. It's like in caveman days. Caveman days, the way they used philosophy back in the caveman days was religion, was stories and deities and all that. What creates everything and primitive science, like eating the corn god, the rice god, and all that. That was primitive science and primitive philosophy. Primitive, and they have their own ethics. They explain ethics with deities and stories. That's primitive philosophy. So that's religion. So religion is a primitive philosophy. That's the same as the caveman days. Primitive, but not all religions are primitive. Some of them are more human, more modern, like Satanism and Dudeism and Objectivism and Buddhism. Buddhism is a little more primitive, but still relevant today as it was back then. It's all about mind, liberating the mind, being peaceful, and follow the Eightfold Path and the Three Noble Truths, all that. Buddhism and Satanism is do unto others. Not that. That's not it. That's Christianity. The Satanism is if someone hits you, hit them back, and indulge in sin, alcohol, fighting, gambling. Yeah, and if someone hurts your family, hurt them back. Just philosophy, Satanism. So yeah. And what else? And if someone gives you the mating signal, if the chick gives you a mating signal, then go flirt with her, and she wants to do it, then do it. Satanism. Christianity is different. Like this one verse, I forgot which one was it, but the son and the father got raped by the son in one of the verses in the Bible. You look it up. Look up the verse. Go on, maybe Skeptics Annotated Bible talks about all these fucked up verses in the Bible, and it's a book, but it's an expensive book. I think last time I checked was like $70 or $60 on Amazon. Might be cheaper now, but back then, like a year ago or so, it was a lot of money. Yeah. So yeah, you look it up on the internet. It's a fucked up book. The Bible is fucked up. Good thing, I like the Satanic Bible. I don't like the Holy Bible, the King James Bible, or any other Bible, Jehovah's Bible, none of that. I like the Satanic Bible. So, like I said on my Facebook, that I'm Inferno. I'm still working on a book. But that's for another story. I need to focus on, I'm way off topic. Virtue selfishness, that's the topic of the video. Yeah. But yeah, my philosophy, Inferno. Satanism, Objectivism, Dudeism. Dudeism is a form of Zen Buddhism, but it's an American version of Zen Buddhism. So yeah.
She attacked Kennedy's statement, which read in full, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And in 1962, 2 years before The Virtue of Selfishness was published, a free market economist, Milton Friedman, took a principled stand against that statement in his book, Capitalism and Freedom, the same principled stand Rand had taken. But he declared that the free man will ask neither what his country can do for him nor what he can do for his country. He will ask rather, how can we keep the government from destroying the very freedom we establish it to protect? Joining Friedman and picking up on a phrase she herself strongly endorsed, Rand might have declared that the individual's pursuit of happiness is a virtue. Or picking up on a popular word in the 1960s, she might have argued that, quote, self-actualization is a virtue, especially since self-actualization has been defined as the achievement of one's full potential through creativity, independence, spontaneity, and a grasp of the real world. There are, of course, greedy and selfish people, but we don't have to endorse Gordon Gekko's view that greed is good any more than we believe that selfishness is a virtue. Instead, we cite Adam Smith's concept of the invisible hand. As Smith pointed out, in a market economy, greedy and selfish people can satisfy their aims only by selling us products we want to buy. The selfish are therefore led by a hand that is invisible to them to advance the interests of others. Yaron has written that business is a selfish activity. And it's a simple matter to correct Yaron's abuse of the English language through Smith's classic insight about the invisible hand. For Smith, who deplored selfishness, business can't be a selfish activity precisely because it advances the interests of others. And as he explains, the marvel of the market is that through the invisible hand, the efforts of the greedy and selfish are channeled to serve the interests of others. The distinction is simple. People may have selfish motives for offering others products they may want to buy, but the activity is not selfish in itself. And plenty of people are in business for idealistic motives. Think of Steve Jobs, who, by the way, spoke about money only as a...
I keep hearing some doors opening and closing, but I don't see any doors opening and closing. It's probably just my mental state, that's personal stuff, but I'm not going to share it on here, on YouTube.
Means of investment in the products he wanted to sell, or John Mackey, or Howard Rourke of Rand's novel The Fountainhead, who consciously devoted themselves to offering products that enhance the world. Now, oddly enough, Yaron's tough-mindedness yields to naivete when he says, well, honesty is the best policy for all of us. Unfortunately, even in a market economy, the world does not work that way. Yaron may decide that dishonest people and selfish people in this world are personally unhappy, but I wonder, economists Thomas Piketty and Paul Krugman have been made millionaires by the market for services that are without merit and have in fact done great harm. You can bet that if these two con men or countless others like them ever do pay the piper, it won't be until the afterlife. What do Harvey Weinstein, Jack Warner, Harry Cohn, Alfred Hitchcock, and Louis B. Mayer have in common? Well, they're all Hollywood producers who were sexual predators against women. No, what they don't have in common is that only one of them, Harvey Weinstein, ever got caught. So we must tough-mindedly admit that honesty is not always the best policy, and that the market, that people are often naive and they buy snake oil from others. We cannot endorse the idea that selfishness leads always to honesty. Selfishness can sometimes pay off. And to those who think government is the answer to regulating the potentially destructive effects of greed and selfishness, we cite the public choice theory of Nobel Prize winner James Buchanan, who called his theory politics without romance. Greedy and selfish opportunists will also be found in government, where the absence of market constraints permits them to act destructively and further their own selfishness, however unhappy Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are, according to Yaron, who probably hasn't had them confide in him for quite a long time. As Yaron and I both know, we advocates of laissez-faire capitalism are the only ones who can truly say that we care about the well-being of the broad masses of people, while the Bernie Sanders of this world are offering them snake oil that can only make matters worse. Yaron has also disavowed selfishness correctly defined. In a recent interview, Yaron was asked about whether he believed in a social safety net, and here's what he said: I believe in a safety net. I just don't believe the government should provide it. I don't believe I should be coerced to help them. You want to help them. I want to help them. We can get together and help them voluntarily. Notice that Yaron said, I want to help them. And so would I. Adam Smith could have had us in mind when he wrote in 1759, how selfish soever man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others. Of this kind is pity or compassion, the emotion which we feel for the misery of others. Compassion is a virtue. Self-actualization is a virtue. But selfishness is not a virtue. You must vote no on the resolution. And in doing so, you'll be even truer to the rational ideals that Ayn Rand advocated. Thanks.
So which side are you guys on? On Yaron Brook from the other video? Last video I put on YouTube and Facebook. Part 1 with Yaron Brook, or Gene on the part 2 of this series of parts of the debate. I'm still going for Yaron Brook, man. He has both of them have good arguments, both of them. But I'm still a objectivist, so obviously, you already know what I'm going for, Yaron Brook. But Gene has some good points when it comes to selfishness, but also where he misinterprets Ayn Rand. He misinterprets Ayn Rand a couple of times throughout his opening statements. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to win the voters with, of course, let's say, my thoughts flow away. This flew away. So, maybe you could tell me who you go for this debate. I'm still going for Yaron Brook. So, or you don't have to if you want to, but yeah. Or subscribe to my YouTube or whatever, or watch the video. Yeah, peace the fuck out.